Hello, welcome to our first review of a van. Now, we don't sell vans on Cinch, but this one, the Volkswagen ID Buzz Cargo, is just too interesting to ignore. It's been loaned to us by the guys at Marshall Group, and we want to find out, is this the coolest way to drive an electric van? Now, the design of this cargo is very similar to the ID Buzz, which we probably all know very well. That is, of course, the people-carrying version of this platform. You can see here it's got the same LED front headlights, the same big Volkswagen badge here, which is obviously a hark back to the old 60s Volkswagen, but this whole thing is inspired by it. I think in this spec, in grey, it doesn't look as good as it could. It looks smart and tidy, probably appropriate for a van, but you can, of course, get two-tone paints and everything like that. Although buyers of vans do tend to sticker them up themselves, don't they? So perhaps you'd go with a full wrap on this yourself. I think cinch purple would look very good. Now, you've probably noticed that the side doesn't have any back windows. That's because, of course, the storage in the back is for your cargo. But interestingly, you've got a door on this side, slidey door, and you've also got a slidey door on the other side. So it's very convenient indeed. And I've opened them. We'll have a look inside. It's very light and nice and easy to use. And the background here, nice and simple design, really clean. Very Germanic, but big Volkswagen badge again, nice and tidy, I think we can all agree. Now, if we were to look inside this van, I just want to show you this cool little feature, which isn't unique to this, but it's still quite cool. You can open it a little bit, or you press this, then you can open it all the way here, which makes me think it's probably going to be quite useful for entertaining if you're the sort to do that at the back of your van. Maybe if you host your van at events, for example, or festivals, you could do this and set up your business in there. Now, in the back of the cargo, you've got 3.9 cubic meters of space, which, as you can see, is very open and very usable. There's not really much in the way to intrude on your space. It's a very usable area, although there are, of course, a couple of wheel arch covers over here, and it's obviously not the biggest van out there. This is, of course, an urban focus van, but you know what? It's a very usable space, and even these little sections here, maybe you could hang some shelves off them. And also, this screen here, which in our van today has a blanked off section, it can be changed. You can go for another spec. You can either get a glass window or like a cage, so it means you can see through to what's going on in the back if you want to do that. And also, an interesting thing that I mentioned earlier is that you've got door one here and you've got another one here. Now, at the business end of the cargo, it's a very familiar affair. Volkswagen, as we know, has for a long time had a habit of throwing equipment at many of its cars. So you're going to get a lot of familiar features from things like the Golf, or even in this case from ID models. Now, firstly, you've got this infotainment screen and this little screen ahead of you here, which are identical. I haven't got the tape measure out, but I'm pretty sure they're identical to the ones you get in things like the ID3 or the ID5, which means they're nice, crisp, modern, but the interaction with this screen in particular just isn't great. The heater controls are quite annoying, and if you're wearing gloves, for example, they're just a little bit fiddly. In fact, they don't even work in this case, or they do now, but they're just not ideal, and I just much prefer twisty dials and buttons. But for those of us who are quite used to it, and I have to admit I am getting quite used to it, it does work fine, and it means you've got a decent sound system as well. This is a van, but it feels like a car in many ways. Driving position though, actually, undeniably, is very van-like, which means I'm sat nice and high, good commanding view ahead of me. There is a lot of dash space down there because there's loads of storage room on the top of the dash. There's even some connections for some 12-volt plugs as well. And you've got loads of storage space around here as well. And of course, 2 seats up front. I mean, when it comes to putting things in the front of the van, this thing is full of space and full of practicality. Big enough space down here for a big cup holder. I mean, usability-wise, functionality, this thing is brilliant, and actually it feels very tough as well. I've noticed the plastics they've used, they look nice, but they're very tough to touch, so I think this thing could be very durable during some working life. We should find out though when we hit the road. Oh, it's good to be in a van. I do really enjoy them. So much nostalgia because of the times in my old man's van, but vans have moved a long way since the mid-90s, I can tell you that. In fact, they moved a long way since probably the early noughties or even much later, and especially now that we have these electric vans with bespoke platforms designed purely to be electric, the game has changed a lot. This MEB platform is used in so many Volkswagen products, but yeah, it does feel quite different in everything you drive. I mean, in this van, for example, it's a big vehicle. It can tow a ton of brake trailer, and it can take 650 kilograms-ish in the back behind me. but it feels really light and springy. I guess they've sprung it quite strongly to take the weight, and now we've got nothing in the back. The van feels nice and bouncy over bumps. It feels quite energetic. It doesn't actually feel heavy at all. Same goes for the steering as well. This electric steering is very, very light, and the turning circle is really good. Because there's no engine under the bonnet, there is, I mean, admittedly there are loads of electrical gubbins under the bonnet, but because there's no big engine in there, it means that you've got a bit more space for those wheels to turn. So the turning circle is really good, and that's going to be very useful in town. Visibility is very, very good actually, even though there is a lot of space, and this is unusual. Certainly it wasn't the case in my dad's old Transit. You didn't have much in the way of dashboard ahead of you. It was all really quite close to you, and it felt sometimes like your toes were up against the engine, and then there wasn't much in terms of bonnet. But this actually has loads of space. It's kind of like a big SUV, but yet because I'm sat higher, because I'm in a commanding position, I can look right down on the nose, and then of course this thing is covered in parking sensors, so it's very easy to get very close to the car or van or whatever ahead. And these door mirrors are big and long. Even though this is a fairly high-tech vehicle, you've just got standard glass mirrors there, which means it's a doddle to see what's around you. And also you've got a reversing camera as well, which we'll test in a little bit more detail later on in this video. And now of course with electric torque on offer, not only is that useful when carrying stuff in the back or towing things, it's also quite useful when you need to pull out of junctions, or you need to nip between cars on different lanes. So if I pick up, this is now a 40-mile-an-hour road, let's drop down to 30, and right down 30, and this is a van, that's quick. It's a really, really quick, instantaneous, classic electric juice. It just pushes you in the back and accelerates up. This thing will top out at 90 miles an hour, which is fast enough, obviously. That's faster than any public road. And as you can hear, it goes around corners and accelerates quick enough to have a lot of our camera gear, which we thought was tied down, sliding around in the back. Oh, by the way, this thing will crack 62 miles per hour in 10.2 seconds as well. But it feels quicker on the move just because of that torque. Now, if you do find yourself using up that range because you're enjoying the torque on offer, well, handily, Volkswagen claims that this thing will charge from 5 to 80% in just 30 minutes, if you find a rapid charger, of course. Although I suspect most buyers of this van are going to have them plugged up overnight before the morning shift, aren't they? All right, so I'm enjoying driving this thing out on the open road, but let's see how it deals with a slightly more city experience. Let's head back to Rockingham and set up a parking challenge. So now we're back at Rockingham, and we have assembled some cars in a position that resembles a very tight city space. Now, if you're a delivery driver, or basically anyone who gets to wear fashionable clothes like myself, and you need to get into a parking space quick so you can drop off your goods or do whatever your van demands, well, this is going to be a good test, because this is a very, very tight space. Now, turning circle is excellent. I've mentioned that. It's very, very good indeed. Visibility on this camera is very wide, although the graphics themselves are pretty low. And now the door mirrors are very good. The beeping is very annoying. It's telling me it's beeping, but we've got some space, don't worry. They always do that, don't they? Now I can see, interestingly, this is showing the gap to be very narrow, but the door mirrors are showing me that I've got a good few inches either side. So I'm in nice and central. No problems, easy. I mean, this thing is so big. Well, it's bigger than a car, isn't it? A small van, and this space was tiny, barely hatchback sized. And yet, here we are in it. So, that concludes a very fun day in this ID Buzz Cargo. I'm a big fan of this van, firstly because of the way it looks, although I have to admit this grey finish is a little bit bland, isn't it? With the two-tone finish Volkswagen offers, I think this thing could be the most fashionable van offering out there. Also though, it's very practical, functional, and crucially, it's easy to drive. Myself, despite my appearance, I'm not a van driver, and I found it very easy to drive, and as we just saw, found it really easy to park as well. Now, of course, I didn't get in the back and do the vanning in the correct way. I didn't load it up with stuff, but you know, we're here to test out how this thing drives. If you've lived with this van before, if you've got an ID Buzz, let us know, are they as good as they say they are at towing and throwing things in the back? Maybe we'll get one back in soon to test those things out. But for now, it's back to car life for me. And if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you very soon. Cheers.